Hi folks, this is Tara the Homestead Hopeful, and today I want to talk about the top 5 vegetables I recommend growing if you're a new gardener and want to contribute to your family's food supply in the face of global shortages and rising prices. If you haven't seen Ice Age Farmer's latest video, I highly recommend watching it. This video is a real eye-opener as to the coming food shortages, what's causing them, and some of the food items that are likely to be in short supply soon. I'll link it in a pinned comment down below if you want to watch it. This video is what inspired me to make this video because more of us need to take control of our food supply right now. If you're a new gardener, it may seem daunting to get started. You probably have very few gardening tools, you probably don't have a tiller, your garden space probably doesn't have excellent soil, and you're probably worried that everything you plant will die. And to be honest, that may happen in the beginning until you learn how often to water, how much sunlight your plants need, how often to feed them, and so on. But don't give up, you'll get the hang of it. So what you should do is focus on plants that A, produce a whole lot, B, practically grow themselves, and C, require little to no maintenance. First of all, if you have the ability, I highly recommend using raised beds. You can build one for about $50 if you use cinder blocks or reclaimed materials, or you can just use plastic tubs, buckets, old feed troughs, or whatever other containers you can find that you can put drainage holes in. Raised beds or containers let you control the quality of your soil a lot better, help prevent diseases, help control moisture and keep weeds down. They're highly beneficial, especially for new gardeners, so I definitely recommend that if you can manage it. If you have very hard soil, very clay soil, very dry soil, or other problems with your natural soil, you may have to use containers to be able to grow well. This will make it pricier to get started, but it's just the reality of gardening if your natural soil is poor. So if you can, use containers or raised beds. If not, you can grow directly in the ground. Just keep in mind that you'll need to weed a lot in the beginning because you need to make sure your plants are not competing with weeds for sunlight and nutrition. Weeds grow a lot faster than most seedlings, so until your plants get bigger and establish themselves, you'll have to keep weeds away from them. Once they get taller, they'll usually shade out the ground below and you won't have to weed much. So, which are my top 5 plants for beginning gardeners? Let's take a look. Number 1. Zucchini. There's an old joke about zucchini. Folks in the city lock their cars to keep people from breaking in and stealing their stuff, and folks in the country lock their cars to keep people from breaking in and leaving baskets of zucchini in the seats. That's because zucchini tends to produce like crazy, and if you plant more than 1 or 2 plants, you'll be up to your neck in zucchini, which is a great thing because you can freeze it and have plenty to last for a long time. If your family doesn't like zucchini, I still recommend planting them because they can produce like mad, and you can have the zucchini in other things like spaghetti sauce, soups, lasagna, zucchini bread, zucchini pancakes, and so forth. Trust me, zucchini has such a mild flavor that you can hide it in just about anything. And if food scarcity becomes a problem, your family will learn to love it. Plus, you can make zucchini noodles and use them as a healthy alternative to pasta. Just be aware that zucchini plants can be huge. I had 2 zucchini plants one year that got so big that even the mail carrier stopped to take a look. I made zucchini bread almost every day that year and still had more zucchini than I knew what to do with. My kids are crazy about lemon zucchini bread, so they were thrilled. Be sure to harvest zucchini often to keep the plants producing. As long as you keep harvesting the zucchini when they're about 6 to 8 inches long, they'll keep putting on more flowers and more zucchini for months. Plus, those flowers are edible. I typically grow the Black Beauty variety. It's an heirloom type with very high yields and is pretty easy to find the seeds. You can also let a couple of the zucchini grow really huge at the end of the season so that you can save the seeds for next year. Number 2. Bush beans. There are 2 main categories of beans, bush beans and pole beans. Pole beans need some sort of trellis system to grow well and to make them easier to pick because they grow on long vines. Bush beans do not require a trellis, so in my opinion, they're much better for a beginning gardener. In fact, some people just broadcast sow bean seeds and let them do their thing. For example, beans meant to be eaten as dry beans, such as pinto beans or navy beans, can just be tossed onto prepared soil and walked over to press them down into the soil. Then you can just leave them to grow on their own. You can go pick them once the pods have dried out and turned brown in the fall, and then just put the dry beans away to use all winter. But dry beans aren't the only bush beans worth growing. Green beans are delicious, freeze well, and produce like crazy. With green beans, be sure to harvest them often because the more you harvest, the more they'll produce. Number 3. Greens. Greens are very easy to grow, but most of them like cooler weather. Things like spinach, kale, collard greens, lettuce, and Swiss chard generally won't grow well in the summer. They'll wilt or bolt, which means they'll start producing seeds. Of course, producing seeds can be good since you can save them, but once they bolt, the texture and flavor won't be the same. For this reason, I recommend planting a variety known as perpetual spinach. It's not actually spinach. Technically, it's a variety of Swiss chard, but it's a biennial, meaning it will live for 2 years and then go to seed. What this means is you can keep harvesting the outer leaves for 2 whole years, and the plant will keep producing leaves from the inside. Then, at the end of 2 years, it will go to seed, and you can save those seeds and plant them for another 2-year harvest. Best of all, perpetual spinach is remarkably hardy in both hot and cool weather. It will survive just fine in very warm weather, making it one of the only greens that will keep growing and producing without wilting or bolting in the heat of summer, but will also hold up to frost and even light snow. It might not hold up to long-term hard freezes, so if you live in a very cold climate, you might have to replant every year, but aside from that, it tolerates most climates really well. Other types of greens are also good choices. They just typically need cooler weather, so plant them in spring or in late summer for a fall harvest. Number 4, cherry tomatoes. Tomatoes are often listed as being great for beginners, but I highly disagree when it comes to most varieties. Tomatoes need staking or caging, and almost always are highly susceptible to diseases and require a whole lot of nutrition to grow. But one notable exception, in my opinion, are the smaller varieties of cherry tomatoes that are meant for growing in containers. While these do need fertilizing, they don't need a lot because they're relatively small plants, and many varieties will produce a whole lot of cherry tomatoes on one very small plant. They even have varieties that will grow in a 6-inch pot. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds has a couple of very small varieties such as Orange Hat and Micro Tom that can grow in very small containers. And Park Seed has both yellow and red cherry tomato varieties called Patio Cherry that produce tons of tomatoes on very small compact bushes. Remember to look for determinate varieties if you're short on space and don't want to stake. Determinate varieties reach a certain size and then stop growing, so they often don't need stakes or cages, and if they do, they don't need large ones. Indeterminate varieties are more like vines and will keep growing and growing until they do need staking. Indeterminate varieties will produce more than determinate varieties, but if you're a beginner, I recommend sticking with determinate types which need less care. Number 5, winter squash. Alright, this last one's a little iffy simply because most winter squash are vining varieties that can get huge and will take up a lot of space in your garden. But winter squash tend to produce very well, are relatively easy to grow, are typically very high in nutrition, and store very well over the winter. Most of them have thick skin which protects the inner flesh from deteriorating for months. There are both bush and vine varieties of winter squash. However, the bush types seem to be more susceptible to vine borers and squash bugs than vining types. For smaller areas, it might be good to stick to the bush types, but if you have the space, vine types might be a safer bet, especially if you'd like to garden without pesticides. Winter squash do need a fair amount of fertilizer, so keep that in mind. Some types to try include spaghetti squash, butternut squash, acorn squash, delicata squash, blue Hubbard squash, and kabocha squash. Alright, so you might be saying, where are the big tomatoes? The cucumbers, the peppers, the corn, the watermelons, the potatoes? And I get it. Those are all things I really love to grow, and my family really loves to eat. But they're all harder to grow for beginners, or they take a lot of space, or they require staking, or constant watering, or a whole lot of fertilizer, or other resources beginning gardeners might not have access to. My list is meant for people who are just getting started and don't have access to a lot of tools, equipment, fertilizer, tomato cages, a greenhouse, etc. In fact, in a pinch, you could probably grow a lot of these with just a shovel and a watering can. I've grown zucchini by just digging a small hole in untilled soil, adding a little slow-release fertilizer, smoothing it over, planting a couple of seeds, and just letting them grow. No weeding, no extra fertilizing, no additional watering, no pesticides. I just let them do their thing and they produced all season. This list obviously isn't meant to be a comprehensive list of everything your family needs to survive. If you're a beginning gardener, it's unlikely you'd be able to grow enough to feed your family, and more than likely you don't have enough space to do that even if you want to. This list is simply meant to supplement your diet with some healthy foods in the event that the stores experience shortages or prices increase substantially. So what do you think? Is there anything else you'd recommend for beginning gardeners in these tough times? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. This is Tara, the Homestead Hopeful, saying stay prepared, stay safe, and stay hopeful.